You don't want to disappoint.
Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 100. Wait for it. That's the sound of a noisemaker, in case you couldn't tell. Yes, we are at the big 100. Not only is this episode 100, but it's also our 2-year anniversary. So I've got a great panel of guests on tonight that I'm going to introduce in just a minute. But in case this is your first time listening to the show or watching it on YouTube, let me tell you, we are the internet's only live roundtable discussion podcast that talks exclusively about the world of visual journalism. So if you have an interest in photojournalism, broadcast journalism, and the news, gear, and topics related to those subjects, I think you'll enjoy the show. Whether you love us or hate us, though, please take a moment to give us a rating on the iTunes or Google Play stores or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. I guarantee you that we look at every comment, review, and post that's submitted about us. If you'd like to continue the conversation online, don't hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or our Instagram pages. Finally, you can find links to all our social media and everything we talk about over at aroundthelens.com. My co-hosts are Zach Roberts.
Hello.
And Ron Hamilton.
Aloha from Hawaii.
Hey, Zach and Ron, how y'all doing tonight?
Another beautiful day, David.
Not too bad.
I do want to point out that Zach has a great new camera. Zach, say something so we can see your camera.
The Camlink, thanks to that, but I'm using my well, it's not on 4K right now, obviously. I don't have that much bandwidth here in upstate New York, but it's using my JVC video camera and run through my laptop, so it's pretty damn cool.
Nice. All right, well, let's get on with the show. Enough chit chat from us. We've got a great series of panelists here on tonight's megasode, as I call it, because I like to get as many people on the show as possible. Because in my opinion, this is a celebration. You gotta celebrate, guys. So let me go one by one here. Let's start with Mike Sharky James. For the few people who may not know who you are, please tell us who you are.
I'm Sharky James, or you can call me Mike or whatever. Just don't call me late for dinner, right? And I host the Petapixel Photography Podcast and also the No Name Photo Show now with Brian Matias. He used to be a Sony artisan. Now he's sponsored by Zeiss and G Technology, does a lot of stuff with On1, etc. And so we have a great show. It's fun. It's just a two guys in their basement format kind of thing. Every once in a while, we bring in a guest and we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, you guys had your first guest on episode 10, right?
That's right. Episode 10, we had Mike Olbinski from Phoenix, Arizona. He's a storm chaser. Episode 12, we had Nicole S. Young, also known as Brian's wife. And we've got some other guests coming up soon, some awesome people.
Sweet. I'm excited. Well, we'll try and limit you down to one dad joke an episode here, but I don't think we're going to be successful. I know Brian tries to get your dad joke quoted down, but you're pretty good at squeezing them out.
I try.
I'm
letting squeezing them out go, by the way. Go.
I was wondering if you were going to run with that.
Does that count? Run with that? That's a different.
Oh,
hey. All right.
Our other returning panelist, a very famous, well-known photographer by the name of Mr. Rick Friedman. Rick, how you doing, buddy?
I'm terrific. Good evening to you and everyone. Thank you very much for having me on this episode. I'm looking forward to it. And, things are real busy up here. I've got a lot of shooting assignments, but I've got some really interesting workshops coming up. This Sunday, we're going to be leaving for flying to Dubai to be part of the Exposure International Photo Festival.
Wow.
Which, we're looking forward to. We're going to be doing some workshops, and I have an exhibit of my presidential campaign work. And shortly after that, we're going to be doing a Bahamas cruise. Take a group of photographers and some models and get on a cruise ship and go to the Bahamas. So we get that in early January. And then in the spring, I'm going to be doing a model shoot with Douglas Dubler in Central Park.
He looks horrible in a bikini.
Douglas, God, that's a terrible vision. But he's a heck of a photographer. So it's sort of fun to intersperse that with all the other shooting assignments.
It's amazing to hear about your life because you're such a globetrotter. All over the place.
David,
I don't think I'm going to hit much more than 110 nights this year in hotels.
Oh, is that all?
That's it. I come home and it's like nobody knows me.
David remembers my Dubai story. It was horrible.
Yeah, oh, great. Tell me off here. Warn me.
Do you remember, David?
No. What was that? Was that episode 27 or episode 4?
I don't remember 50? Which episode it was, but the Gulf Plus Expo was going on in Dubai. And I posted. I thought the shootout had already gone on with it was RC Conception, Ben Von Wong, and Strobist himself, David Hobby. And I said, "Oh, my goal on my bucket list is to do that in the future." And he's like, "We haven't done it yet. Hop a plane. You can take my spot." That's what David said. And I didn't have a valid passport. Otherwise, I would have been in Dubai the next day on the stage.
No.
So,
sorry to hear that.
Sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to take over your show.
No worries. No worries. I'd be honored to have such an esteemed podcaster like you take over my show. Might bump up the numbers. Get that Sharky bump again. We'll talk about our numbers in a second. But I got to introduce the other panelists on the show. Of course, the world-renowned photographer a la carte, creating awesome videos every day, making great video products, Mr. David Wells. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you very much. Rick and I are pulling the New England team from to represent on the show tonight. I'm happy to be here and happy to be part of number 100.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, doing more and more films. Just got a couple more film festival victories, which is always nice to do, and got a bunch of projects coming up. And it is getting cold up here, as Rick was talking about before.
It's already cold. What do you mean getting?
Yeah. Because we had that weird spike in October where it was warm, and now it's really cold.
Oh.
It's so cold, I'm going to step out actually and close the window over here, which I had cracked for a little bit, but it's too cold here. So you'll excuse me for just a second, guys.
No worries, no worries. Our final panelist on tonight's show, coming all the way down from down under. He rode a wallaby to be here, and a dingo ate his baby. It's Craig Stampley. Craig, how you doing, buddy?
Very good, thank you. And wallaby tastes very, very good if you ever get the opportunity. I had some in Tasmania earlier this year. It's a lot like kangaroo.
Oh, okay.
Aussie.
What either of those taste like, I'd probably be able to relate.
It tastes a lot like venison, to be honest.
Okay.
Kind of game.
Still haven't eaten that. Keep on going. Eventually, you get the and then I'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And eventually a bit like overdone chicken if you cook it too long.
Perfect. I can relate. Craig, what have you been up to?
Oh, this week, well, let me think. Yesterday was a nice house, several $1 million house, doing some photos for the builder, for their website. It's a bit of commercial work. This afternoon's going to be seeing a client about some baby photos from a photo shoot I did for them a week or two ago. And then I'm getting ready for some models to jump in my swimming pool on Saturday.
What? Nice, man.
Another tough day in the office.
It's going to be a very tough day. So myself and another photographer, we're collaborating on getting people to jump in our pool or jump in my pool and trying different things. So should be good fun. Hopefully the weather warms up a little bit.
Well, what's the weather like right now?
I have my passport. I can just fly down.
Come on down. I've told you you're welcome. Weather at the moment, it's going to be mid-20s here in Brisbane. That's Celsius.
Yep.
And I think possible showers later this afternoon. So we're sort of the tropical half of the country. And so it's going to be a little bit thunder and lightning maybe later this week.
That's about 77 Fahrenheit.
Oh, there you go.
25 Celsius, by the way.
It's t-shirt weather.
Thanks, Google.
Well, anyways, if you say, okay, Google, or hey, Siri, or Alexa, you can mess with everybody's speakers. That's what I've learned. Thank you, Smart Hubs. Anyways, let's talk about the show a little bit. So our first topic this evening is going to be about us. I got to be, it's our anniversary show, so I got to take a little bit of time, give you a little bit of a state of the show sort of address, and talk about where we are, where we're going, where we've been, how things have been going, giving you all the sweet, juicy numbers that I'm more than happy and willing to share with my loyal listeners. As I've read from some of your reviews, I have longtime listeners, which I'd be curious to know. If you are a longtime listener, please let me know when you started listening. In fact, if anybody is listening right now or watching, I would like to know when you started listening to the show.
Does July count as long term?
I would think anything beyond 2 episodes probably would count as long term. But let's talk about a few things. So a couple basic stuff. Every year I change up the logo and change up the intro music to the show. So if you look at my lower third, you'll see the new logo right there. I'm willing to take suggestions to make it better, but that's pretty much where I'm going with it right now. As far as new music, I'll probably introduce some new music on episode 101. We're having a great guest on to talk about shooting vulnerable people. So look forward to that next week. And then we're going to take a week off for Thanksgiving. We're going to take a week off for Christmas. But otherwise, we got 50 shows planned for the entirety of season 3. If you want to see any of our entire show schedule, I've posted it all online at aroundthelens.com. So the entire season 3 schedule is posted online. You can see every single show, every single date it's expected to air. So go check that out. That's a new thing we're doing this season. Other than that, we may be trying some new experiments, some new stuff, some new shows. I don't know. It really depends on how much time myself, Zach, or Ron have to really devote to the channel. But look out for that. If you have suggestions about what we can do to make it better or anything you'd like to see, please let me know. But the big thing we're doing this season is really trying to focus on specific topics. So, the way I've run the show for the first few years, the first 2 years has been pretty much, I would say, haphazardly would be a fair way to say it. Really, it's like I kind of put together whatever the topics are and then kind of put together people who want to be on the show. So you sometimes get gold from that chair. You get gold and sometimes not so much. So I'm trying to eliminate the not so much shows and just make them all gold. So we'll be doing a bit more focused with our guests and panelists who come on the show. So, for instance, if we want to have Mike on because he's, releasing a new podcast all about Nikon cameras or something, who knows, whatever he decides to do, we'll have him on the show. He'll talk about that topic, and then we'll talk about maybe news and gear after that. So, anyways, that's kind of like what to look forward to. We'll be starting that out with episode 101 coming up next year. Awesome. Next episode. I keep on confusing years and seasons. I'm trying to do this season thing because that's all in vogue, right? You have like seasons of your show, even though it's just another set of episodes.
We could just do it like Netflix in the future, just record a year's worth of shows and then drop it all at once.
There you go.
That might be a thing.
For 52 hours.
And then have a sexual harassment scandal and then have to not air them. And
oh, no. I hate for that to happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't recast me or recast me.
Cut you out, right.
Is it possible to sexually harass yourself?
If it is, I think we're all guilty of that. Anyways.
All about consent, boys.
What do you mean there? I'm not.
I always get consent for myself. That's all I'm saying.
You turned yourself down.
Yeah, probably a lot of times. Let's talk a little bit about numbers. Of course, we've seen some growth this year, but not nearly as much as the first year. Honestly, the biggest spike in growth that we've seen has been from Mike Sharky James when he was on. As we've famously coined it behind the scenes, the Sharky jump, the Sharky push, the
Sharky bump.
Bump, yes. We haven't jumped the Sharky yet. We might this episode.
Didn't I double your listenership?
You did.
It's hard. You can only do that once. That's hard. That's a tough nut to crack again.
You put us on the map, but people still don't know where we are. We're like that country that if I asked you where it was on the map, you couldn't point it out. Anyways, so we haven't seen that much growth, but I will say we are starting to grow in the last few months or so. We've seen a lot of growth, and we're averaging about 320 to 350 or so subscribers. So for those of you who are listening, thank you so much for subscribing to the show. So we have seen some growth. Hopefully we'll see some growth tonight after this show, and hopefully see some growth in the next season. So that's the most important number as a podcaster that I look at is growth in subscribers, because you guys are the lifeblood of this show. And if we can just get to 5 figures, we can put advertising on the show. I'm sure another 20 years we'll be there.
Yeah, do it faster than that.
Well, I have to wait for my audience to multiply. That's the limiting factor.
You're waiting for that. Wait, multiply. Are you waiting for your audience to actually reproduce?
Like actually have children who they can then, generation. This is a multi-generational journey, guys. All right. We're like going to Mars. We're going to Alpha Centauri. This is a multi-generational trip, in case you didn't know.
There's no coming back, I guess.
No, there's no. We're dead. We're dead.
What's your fan of Around the Lens? You never did that.
Eventually, my children will take over this show, and then they will have. They won't have it.
So you're saying
got to get on that then.
You saying there's 350 listeners per episode?
There's about 350 subscribers. Average listenership per episode, I would have to look at the actual details, but yeah, it's about it's about. I mean, what is that? The listeners per episode? That's the more important number, Sharky?
I don't know. It doesn't really matter. No, it's just it's hard to tell. It's you're on a different platform than we are, so it's hard to tell for sure. But you can tell from the numbers from month to month.
Yeah,
I will say cannot tell you how many, but we're in the 5 figures per episode. Of
course, we're in the 3 figures. You saying you're in the top 5 percentile? I'm in the top 95 percentile. I gotta imagine. I will say really though that
you've got you're in a niche, so you're in a really niche. So that 350 could be 1,000 somewhere else.
I will say though that since its inception, the show has reached almost 20,000 downloads.
Wow!
So as
I hit that just while we were talking.
Oh,
we can boot you from the show, right?
That's right.
Freed up my evening for me.
Hey, speaking of which, this is live on YouTube. What's it competing against on television at the moment? I mean, this would be what, prime time?
The president.
I don't know what airs on. I honestly watch so little TV.
Usually Monday Night Football, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
We literally typed in Monday Night into Google, and Monday Night Football came across. So I don't know.
You need to get Trump to tweet about us.
Oh gosh.
Ooh. See, I wonder how many photojournalists we're losing to breaking news stories.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot.
I don't know. All 7 of us are here.
Speaking of,
go through the list of how many of us make a living in photojournalism these days, and it's like anyway, it's all other thing.
Speaking of YouTube, I won't tell you how many subscribers we have. I'll keep that a secret. Keep you guessing. But I will say we have more episodes of this show than we do have YouTube subscribers. So
wow,
there you go.
We need to fix that.
Well, I found that a lot of people, and Sharky, you can kind of back this up. Are people watching your YouTube show of No Name Photo Show, or are they just primarily listening to podcasts? How would you say the audience disparity is there?
Well, this will be really revealing. We stopped doing the video version about 3 or 4 episodes in. We're we're 13 episodes deep now on that. We're only weekly on that show, but there was there was about 400 people or so watching every episode. More than listening to this show. We're watching us on the YouTube. Ouch. Aren't you glad you had me? That's why I'm here.
This is why podcasters don't reveal their numbers. You bigwig stepping all over us.
We're closing in on 5 figures on that show. We're solidly in the 4 figures, but there was about 400 people that were watching, but it was just, we're busy guys. So we're just like, get it. I don't want to shower today.
It's a lot of effort, and if it's honestly not worth it, then don't do it. I mean, honestly, this YouTube video stream is really just a byproduct of hosting a live Google Hangout. I honestly do next to nothing with this after it's aired. So,
well, and that's what
there you go.
We use the Hangout so we can see and interact just like we're doing here. But we were editing it to the video as well, and it was just too much. I highly edit the show that we listen to. Or that you listen to, so that's
why it sounds so good.
It's a good
that great
9
audio
to 10 hours of editing right there.
Oh my god!
So David, can I jump in here just for a bit as well, or maybe I'm going off the message here? But in reading your notes, you were talking about the program and also sort of the future of it. And one of my questions for you was, what might be the ways to get it used by students, academics, etc.? Because hate to say this, but we've got a panel of 7 old white guys, as my wife from India would point out. And she would also point out that the future of pretty much all media is not old white guys. It's young people of all colors, which she's quite excited about. And so I don't know, if you've thought about that, if there's a way maybe to start getting some of the professors in the photojournalism world on here as a way to add their voices, but also, frankly, to drive their students to pay attention to.
Great idea.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk a little bit about diversity, since that's a hot topic, and of course, our show is not evident of it. Much like Nikon,
well, it's very evident of it not being a topic.
I think a better idea is to get the students on here and tell them to get out now and go change profession so you can actually feed yourself.
Yeah.
That's probably
don't do that kind of every episode, though. I feel like every episode ends with Zach me going,
I need money.
Like, well,
you should have in the corner. It should be, did Zach get paid? And a little just ongoing status. Yes or no.
How many days since Zach's been paid?
Just a live shot of your bank account.
Exactly. You just do that. Like,
it's so small you can't see it though.
Here we go. We'll do Zach's QuickBooks and go, oh, well, Zach made $600 on that assignment. Oh, but it cost him $350 to do it. So yeah, figure that one out.
Though.
You know, I to go into this topic about making a living at this. I mean, I have a saying, you know, if you want to make a lot of money, go do something else. If you want to have a great life, be a photojournalist. It is, to me, the best thing in the world, you know. Or as I put it, I get paid to run around the world, play with my toys, and hang out with fascinating people. And personally, I wouldn't trade that for all the money. You know, how much money we made, you know, a number of years ago in terms of real dollars was actually a lot more. Stock sales were much higher. There were a lot more stock sales. I mean, we used to joke about it. You know, you just live by good headshots alone. However, as we are where we are right now in the world of media, as we all know, all that has gone away. Nobody's buying a headshot of the president or a senator. All those sales are gone because social media has taken all that away. And, you know, we've got this term now, which drives me crazy personally, citizen journalist. Those of us who make our living as photojournalists have to be responsible for what we produce. We have to back it up, and it has to be completely accurate. And, you know, on rare occasions, I've actually had to defend a caption because the reporter's reporting didn't agree with my caption, but I was there, which meant the other person wasn't. So those of us who do this, and this is our profession, you know, there are certain rules which anybody running around with their iPhone or anybody running around with a camera who's more than willing to give their photograph to an agency for free, nobody is backing that picture up. For those of us on this panel, we have to be completely responsible for that photograph. And our integrity and the integrity of our profession depends on that. Obviously, I feel very strongly about this.
Really? I couldn't tell.
Yes, I know.
You know, we've talked about that. You know, we talked about the guy who had his manatee photo go viral. And we talked about giving away your photos for free. And, you know, he didn't have a problem with it. You know, his goal was to get the image out there because he wanted to, you know, obviously save a manatee. But, you know, his whole kind of take on it was, you know, I'm not destroying the industry with my one photo of manatee that I gave away for free. And, you know, overall, I was like, yeah, you're right. You're not. But the combined total of every single person who doesn't, you know, charge for their imagery is bringing down the whole industry. So one person is, you know, insignificant, but the whole is, you know, making it harder for everyone.
And it's not going to change either.
I agree with that. That's just what I was going to say, Sharky. You know, it's not going to change for us. So therefore, those of us that are making a living doing this have to continue to find new ways to do it. And I think we have to just, you know, the pictures of mine that do well in terms of stock are not another portrait of the president. There are a million of those free. It's something that's a unique story or a unique portrait.
I always tell people when I talk to, when photojournalism students, you know, reach out to me, I always tell them, you got to make yourself valuable. When I was, my goal when I was at my last newspaper, it was down to just me and another guy. My goal was to be more valuable than the other guy. So when it comes down to it, I'm not the one that gets canned. He ended up leaving. That ended up settling itself, and it was just down to me. So, and I was doing video back then too. This was like 2008. So almost like 10 years ago. You have to do video. You have to be a multimediographer, as Frederick Van Johnson from TWIP says, right? You have to do everything and try to do it as well as you can and make yourself valuable. If you can build an audience on Instagram and elsewhere, that's impressive to people. What do people want these days? They want reach. You know, so you have to have what the masses don't have.
Yeah.
And so whatever that is, do that.
Absolutely. And, we got criticized, and I don't know why we get criticized and while other places don't, but we got criticized for being down on the industry, about being down on photojournalism, because, again, week after week, we would just basically say that this industry has no future and we're not getting paid and yada, yada, yada. Or mostly Zach would say that. And, or like, people are saying, I quit the industry and stuff like that. Was like the running kind of topics of the show. And people would be like, you guys are so down on the show. You should be more positive. Like, we're not down because we want to be. We're down because that's the state of the industry. It's not. Look, we'd love to say like, oh, and Zach got paid 6 figures for that one shot he did, and then he's got another 7-figure job. I mean,
that would be I was just telling somebody today, since the year 2000, which is, albeit almost 2 decades ago now, half of all photojournalism jobs are gone.
Yeah.
That's sobering. When I left my paper, I left a perfectly good photojournalism gig, right? They still haven't replaced me. What they did is they automatically took the savings. They bought new gear for the writers, since they would be shooting. The whole time I was there, they didn't buy a darn thing. I leave, they get new gear. So the industry is horrible. Photojournalism as a job is great if you can make a living at it. So you have to figure out how to make it work for you. And it's going to take thinking outside the box. You can't do things the way we did it back in the day.
You have
to deal with today's reality.
It has to be your passion. And a lot of what you just said sounded like things that we said a long time before the years you were talking about. Because, I came along just too late to work for Life magazine, and I missed all those great stories. And now the kind of stories that a lot of the ones I got to do don't exist anymore. But it's a whole different world. The money's never been great, but beats the heck out of having a real job.
Right, and I think the reason I raised the question was to be able to direct young people to a resource like this and say, actually, look at somebody like Rick, who's been self-employed for an awfully long time.
Successfully unemployed, as I refer to it. I refer to it as successfully unemployed.
But you've been successfully unemployed a long time.
I have, a very long time.
And you also, I know from our interactions, have a diversity of sources of income or revenue streams, as I tell students. And I think that would be something, if I was moving forward, Dave Murphy, in terms of where to take this, would be to think, what are other people you could bring on to give to other people? Like you had, last time I was on was, what's her name in Washington, D.C., behind Memento Workshops?
Jamie Rose.
Yeah, Jamie. And Jamie, Jamie has some of these same gripes, but Jamie also has an optimism and enthusiasm, kind of like Rick was just talking about, to talk about where it can go and where it might go. And so, if you're, because when I read the notes, I was thinking, so what can I throw out there of value to continue around the lens? And I think the thing would be to, what are other audiences that can use it besides old white guys?
So let's talk about the diversity issue for a moment, or at least the diversity topic, right? First of all, I'd like to say that I think our show is very diverse. If you've listened to the show or paid attention to it, we have a wide range of male, female, different races on the show. I don't exclude anyone from this show. I will take absolutely anyone as long as they have something to do with the world of visual journalism. And I invited every single one of the former panelists who's been on the show. I invited back for this show. And you are all the ones who were able to make it tonight. So I invited many of our ladies back. I invited everybody. Again, the entire group was invited. Some could make it, some couldn't. We were going to have, Julie Dermansky on tonight, but unfortunately she had to jump out at the last minute. Jamie was more than welcome back. Great panelist. Would love to have had her on. So we've got a great, diverse show, and I think that's, I think people saying like, the industry is one way or another, based on like surveys or something, okay, sure, but I think there's, so much great talent out there amongst our extremely diverse career field, both young and old. We've had young people on the show as well as older people. We've had students, we've had teachers. I famously had an episode with a professor and a student from Syracuse University when I went there. So that was a great episode, by the way. You should listen to that. Yeah, totally agree. We should have everybody on here who has an opinion about the matter, young or old, bring them on the show. And I do want to get your guys all take on, how we can make the show better. If you're looking at our numbers, we're about 200 likes on Facebook, which is great. We got about 500 followers, almost 600 followers on Twitter. Instagram, which I haven't actually touched in probably about a year, is about still 3,000 followers. But, you know, again, we haven't seen much growth. And that's the thing. When you're doing something like this for free, you know, I don't, you know, get paid to do this. Zach doesn't get paid. Ron doesn't get paid. You know, if anything, I'm paying.
I'm still, wait, the check was in the mail. You keep telling me, man.
I've got a tip when you're ready.
That's it.
I do. I want to open it up to you all for tips, because ultimately you guys are part of my audience too, right? You know, you're visual journalists. This show is made for you all as well as it is made for me to do it. And when you're not getting paid to do something, you know, growth and, you know, response from the audience is really all you get sort of out of something like this, as in addition to actually the joy of doing it. So, you know, and that's why I'm saying when we talk about growth, you know, like I said, I've seen some growth recently, but for a long time it was kind of stagnant. And I want to know how to make it better. I want a bigger audience because I want to make it a better show. So I'm going to throw it out to you all. Obviously, Dave gave me some suggestions. What suggestions do you all have to make this show better in the coming year so we can grow our audience?
I've got, you know, I think I told you this before too. I've got currently on an Instagram 21.6 thousand followers, and that wasn't by accident. That was, you have to, these days you have to go reach out to people, follow people. So what I tell photographers is, if you do a certain genre of photography, go follow the followers of someone who's similar to you. And on Instagram, this is really inside baseball, but this is what we need here, right? If you follow a bunch of people, they'll, you know, tap the brakes on you and be like, whoa, we think you're a bot. You click the thing, say, no, I'm not a bot. I'm just trying to grow my following, etc. You won't ever see that again. You have to go. So I followed the followers of other photography podcasters because that's what I needed, people that are interested in a photography podcast. So what I would suggest photojournalists, visual journalists, multimediagraphers, etc. do is go find the others and go follow their followers. Those people will follow you. Does that lead to anything? I don't know. You know, it depends on how you making money. I mean, that might lead to somebody might hire you because they see your work through somebody else. You just never know. It doesn't hurt having thousands of followers. It's not a bad thing. And these days, that's what people want, like I said, is reach. So go ahead and build your personal brand. It's all about branding these days. And I think that's what photojournalists need to do. You need to be a brand. It's no longer about the New York Times or whatever. It's about you. What do you bring to the table? You want a brand. So then if there's any photo editors out there, etc., are hiring, they're thinking about you. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, as our parents and grandparents said. So you need to stand out. You just can't wait for people to come to you. You need to be more proactive about it. That's part of the job these days, says the guy who's not in the job anymore.
Yeah.
I've been out for 4 years now.
Nice. But, you know, rest of the panel, you know, what do you think are some suggestions we can make the show better? And, like, what do you think, like, you know, well, first, you know, do any of you listen to the show?
Yeah.
You listen to the show. Okay. So, Craig, what do you like about the show and what can we do better to make it something that, you know, maybe you want to tell your friends about to listen to as well?
Look, I enjoy the banter and I enjoy getting the American perspective of what's going on, particularly with the politics and stuff. It's a little bit foreign to what we have going on over here. So not that I've ever really been politically minded, but finding out what's going on, what Zach experienced in Charlottesville a couple of months ago, that I just found that quite fascinating because we don't have really, well, I've never experienced an equivalent over here. We're a much smaller population, you know, quite spread out. And as racist as we probably are, it's definitely not as bad as what we see coming out of the US. So I think this perspective I enjoy. I don't know, just the diversity of the other white guys on the panel is interesting. Again,
I gotta say, we have the most diverse white guys on this show.
Well, we got people from Australia, from
exactly from the United States. But you're worrying about diversity, or you're mentioning it that there's no Asian people or black people or women or whatever. You're not actually not including them. There just might not be that interest from those people or those groups. How you attract them, I don't know. We're very Anglo-Saxon over here, very Anglophile. So, of course, we have our Aboriginal communities, but we don't see them day to day. They're living in different parts of Australia. typically not in Brisbane. The black people that we do tend to have in Australia have come from Africa, and again, they tend to possibly stay amongst themselves. I don't see that much diversity in my day-to-day life anyway, so
yeah,
I'm not sure how to attract it.
You know, Dave, you mentioned we should get younger people and a diverse set of people, but you know, we just spent about 10 minutes talking about how the career field's dying. And I think the majority of us are over 30, if not over 40 on this show. So I think we're kind of like a bunch of legacy folk.
I don't agree.
I agree with you, David, and I'll let you take it.
Well, sure. I mean, I was thinking actually, and again, I guess because I'm self-employed and I'm just always thinking, okay, how can I solve this problem?
Right.
You have seen, I'm assuming, and I'm not saying to do it this way, but do you follow on Instagram Reading the Picture?
I've not, but I'll check it out.
You really should follow Reading the Picture. And unfortunately, and the good news is they put up one picture that have a very long text block. And I know this would be a production issue, but if you had one picture of, I don't know, Rick's or mine or anybody else's, and then a 15 or 20-second thing where I'm talking about it, not just talking about this is a photo I made, but something that's an insight. That's frankly how I get drawn to 90% of the stuff that I get on Instagram, is that somebody's got either an image or a text block or a little video or both that pulls me out of that organic process of just scrolling through all that shit on Instagram. And I go, oh, I want to go into that. And then if I go into that and I read, and reading the pictures is one of the best ones, so it's text heavy. And you have this conversation. I mean, there's going to be somewhere in the midst of all of this tonight a number of useful things. The problem is the time issue, which is you have to go back and pick them out, or we should have a genius button. I'm about to say something profound, so I hit the profound button, and then it saves it. But I mean, that would be something that would drive people, I think, to it. And I would actually, Rick, do you read Reading the Picture?
I do not, but
okay. I strongly recommend it.
Because what my suggestion,
Reading the Pictures with an S.
Pictures, please. Reading the Pictures.
Readingthepictures.org. It's run by Michael Shaw. I actually, years ago, I think it was like 2011 or 2012. I didn't write it, but basically I told them an entire breakdown, and they used a whole set of my photos to analyze a scene during Occupy Wall Street, because I was the only photographer who actually had photos from a court case that was happening, and actually got a lot of hate from it, but from the activist community, because basically it proved that it relatively proved that the activist that was claiming that she was hit by a police officer was not true. she was lying about her story in court. So I got a lot of hate from it, but it's a very useful, if you're a photojournalist or whatever, if you're not reading that, you definitely should follow it. Their analysis and kind of discussion about certain photos is really fantastic.
The reason I was pointing my finger was you just said the profound thing. I want to see that picture, and I want that 40-second clip that you just said about the background of why you photographed it and what happened with the truth and the case and all that. That's like I'm gonna watch that on Instagram or something else and say, yeah, I want to go to this site and learn more. Because I think, Dave, if I can jump in here, and you can cut me off whenever, I don't think the problem is the quality of the content. I think the problem, like in so much of all of our work, is getting people to it. And so,
can I throw something in as a suggestion? We've got a group of folks who are pretty darn good making photographs, and how many of our photographs have we seen tonight?
we should have seen Zach's just now. That's correct.
Right. So yes, and the suggestion that maybe as the intros run, that there is a short clip of a handful of photographs of each of the folks who were on the show that night. So people who don't know David's work or Craig's work, can take a look at it. They might tune in because they know Zach's work or Sharky's work, but then there are 4 or 5 other people's work they don't know. And, the introduction, who cares what I look like? Maybe you'd like to see a photograph or two that I've created. So
good point. I do want to say that we have seen growth. I have been a little bit down on myself in the show, but, we have seen growth on their webpage. We're averaging about 7,000 uniques a month, so that's not bad. That's about double what we were doing last year on the website. And again, it's small growth over time, which is what we're looking for. And I'm excited to see what we can do this coming year with, again, how we kind of change up the format a little bit. And again, I think growth is a good indicator of telling me as a producer and a director to like, hey, maybe you should change things up. Hey, maybe what you're doing isn't working. It's I mean, let me throw it over back to you, Sharky, as the only other, like, well, not the only, but, as one of the preeminent podcasters on our group, I mean, you've seen obviously growth, you've seen wild growth in both your shows, but, do you make changes based on user feedback? How do you do you make any adjustments to anything based on anything with regard to numbers? Like if you see a dip in your numbers, will you change something? I don't know if that's happened to you yet. How do you sort of affect your own show like that?
I don't make any changes.
Perfect.
So what I did is, I've been asked before, how did you develop the show? And I honestly don't remember. We're talking only a few years ago now. And I must have notes somewhere, but when I developed the format of the show, obviously I thought that was decent, and it hasn't changed since day one. It's been pretty much the same. If you go listen to the Lens Shark Photography podcast, which is still available, I was horrible back then, but it's basically, you'll recognize it as basically the Petapixel Photography podcast. Just, I'm a lot more animated. Not a little bit more. I'm kind of hyper now. And I sound really sleepy and like I'm on Dramamine back there. So you listen in reverse order, and people have done that. It takes months. I get worse as time goes by. So, but I've been doing this. My show, 228 episodes, 40 episodes of the old one, and then now 13 currently with the No Name Photo Show. You get better over time. You have to create a product that people like, and don't mess with it. People don't like it when you mess with their show, and I'm doing air quotes here.
Yeah.
I built in from the start consistency. I built in ongoing jokes, ongoing things that people could look forward to. That whole next thing didn't start from the beginning. It just kind of happened, and then people were like, you didn't do next between stories. Do that again. And now it's every darn story, and it's become a thing. Brian Matiash, my co-host on No Name Photo Show, hated it. And now he loves it. And people say they listen with their kids, and their kids, they do it between. It's become a thing. And so you have to create a great product. You have to be consistent. You have to work on your brand. And I can't remember what your question was about changing for change's sake or for growing.
Well, no, I'm saying like, again, maybe it's not something you've experienced, but do you ever see maybe at a point, maybe in the future, where you'll have to change or adjust the show to perhaps increase audience numbers? Like, let's say your show audience stagnates to a point where, again, it's not growing at all. Do you think you'll think to yourself, maybe I need to change something to increase subscriber growth? Like, or if you see a dip in subscriber growth, like do you think you change the show to kind of reflect that?
See, here's the thing. So a stadium full of people listen each episode. If I make a change, I might lose a lot of people more than I would necessarily gain. And who am I gaining, right? So the people that are listening, they either like the show or they don't. If I change it, then you alienate the other people. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going with what I'm going right now. We're still growing. We're not growing as fast as we used to, but I haven't worked on growth as much. I've been busy with developing other shows and such, and writing a book, the whole deal.
Writing a book?
Yeah.
Scoop.
I wrote a book, 43 chapters of a book, and then the Petapixel Photography podcast took off, and I shelved the book. There's your dad joke right there. And then I'm here all week. And so I'm going to get back to doing it now. Awesome. But like, I'm not busy enough as it is. But I'm not going to mess with the formula. It works. I mean, we've literally had millions. You talked about having what did you recently cross 50,000 downloads all time?
20,000, but all right.
20,000. Oh, sad. That's really. I'm sorry. I thought it was 50. No, we recently. I can't tell you what number, but millions. We've had millions of downloads, and so that's insane. I'm not going to mess with the formula. It works for, like I told you before we started recording, it could have gone either way. It could have been horrible and people would have been like, I'm not listening to it. But it's become one of the most popular photography podcasts of all time. I'm not messing with the formula. You don't go you don't go changing Happy Days by making the Fonz jump a shark. Oh wait, they did.
Yeah, like, you know, you're talking about formula. I don't see us changing the core of what this show is ever. You know, I mean, it is what it is. You know, if the show itself isn't working, the core isn't working, then I'll just end the show. But if the core is working, which it is working. It's just, you know, it's growing at a level that I think is okay, but it'd be great to see it grow, you know, larger and faster. But, you know, it is what it is, and I think it's good for what it is, but I'll never change what it is. It's always going to be a visual journalism roundtable discussion. It's just how refined is it going to be? And hopefully, what I hope to do over the next year is refine it to a nice, sharp point to where you come on and you listen to it, you're entertained, you enjoy it, and hopefully you are interested in telling a friend. Because that's where you get the largest growth, I think, is word of mouth from other people. You tell somebody about the show, everybody becomes force multipliers for your message, and you see growth.
To go back to what was said, sorry, Shark.
Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
Thank you. To go back to what was said earlier by Sharky, you know, is it more social media? You know, young people, they're finding their information out there. They're looking at things that whiz by. Does the image catch their eye? If the image doesn't catch their eye, they're certainly not bothering to read who shot it. You know, do people, I mean, you know, before the show, do people put out on social media, I'm going to be on? You know, we put, does. I'm sorry?
Rick Friedman does.
I did, yes. You know, and I'm sorry that I didn't do it sooner as we're running through our insanity here.
No worries.
But,
I apologize that I didn't. I should have done that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, you know, is it a good photograph? Will people stop to see, oh, we like this picture. Who shot it? Oh, I can listen to this person tonight. Yeah. And, you know, I think we need to gear things, and in marketing my own workshops, you know, you need to gear them towards a younger audience. And that's where they're getting their information. And, you know, I mean, I keep joking around here, you know, we need to hire a really smart 18-year-old to do this.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's, you know, social media is very important. And that's it. I mean, I've posted things on social media, and I have had people contact me and say, hey, I'd like to buy that photograph. Or my favorite one where somebody contacted me and said, I saw this on Facebook. Can I get it without a copyright? I said, sure, for X number of dollars you can. And then they wanted to argue that it was already on social media, it was public domain. So I'm going to throw something out, that something I tell all the folks who are nice enough to take my workshops. For anybody listening, you all know this. If you're going to put it on social media, don't just put the copyright on the bottom. Put it maybe 10% right through the middle of the picture. So when they steal it, they know who they stole it from.
We're doing a test right now, guys. I just tweeted out. I've got 17.8 thousand followers on Twitter. Let's see if any of them care to come over here and check us out. So watch the numbers, David. Let's see. One guy will come in. Did you come in from Sharky's tweet? No.
Well, I'll tell you right now.
All 17,000 are coming.
I'll tell you right now, this is information you guys can't see, but I can because I run the show. We have 3 viewers watching live right now. So if I see that number, pick up. It'll be because directly.
We can get a 33% upgrade.
Does anyone actually watch, other than not including gamers, because that's a whole huge community, like on Twitch and everything, or even on YouTube as well? But does anyone actually watch things live on YouTube, like podcasts or anything? That's something that I've just watched.
I don't
drop off. I mean, I get why, like, we do it because of the format of the show and everything like that. But like, I literally, I've never seen anybody. I don't do it, and I watch a lot of live stuff, like on Facebook and other places. You know, which is something that we're looking into technically on how to do. Is also like porting this sort of thing right over to Facebook, but as well. But unfortunately, Facebook is not being too friendly to people who don't want to spend, you know, a couple grand on a budget, so that you can actually have like a multi-person call-in show on the thing, which is,
you'll get a lot more interaction on Facebook, because if video goes native to Facebook, their algorithm kicks in, they promote it out more, all your followers and such, find it. So you'll definitely pick up.
We started uploading this after it airs, usually the next day, just to, so it's not at 11 o'clock at night that we're uploading it or something like that, but uploading it to Facebook, and we see that's actually getting, for video content, that's getting the most views, just naturally with no ad buys or anything like that. Of course, then Facebook, as we all know, which obviously this leads into our next topic, but is now starting to block, screw with people's feeds, and the fact that they don't see the like pages, and they don't see that. They're testing that in other countries, so that now, unless you're buying ad dollars, you're not getting into people's feeds. And that's even on top of already the whole see first thing that you used to have to tell the people who like your pages to do. So it's going to be a whole new game, especially for news people. I work for with the place that I make the most money. I work for comicbook.com, which is the 4th largest entertainment website on the internet and the largest comic book website on the internet. And I do stills and video and things for them as well. And they had to they made the decision to take their video. They have an entire studio in Nashville, and they now are doing native content for Facebook, and also they have a video show that is for Facebook, and that's been one of the ways they've been seeing their numbers drop, and they've had to actually just buy into the whole Facebook game completely, and I'm looking at their YouTube numbers, and it's nothing, and it's all on Facebook now. So not to tie it into the next topic, but that's going to be the next generation of how, when we actually try to get people through this social media game, to actually see our work and to be able to click through to our website or our Twitter feed or Instagram or whatever else from Facebook or from Twitter or vice versa. We have to all figure that out now. And also, it sounds like we basically can't just be popular. We have to also buy into the beast, and either pay them money or work with them 100% and do native content for them, which is problematic, for advertising and so many other things.
That's why it's important to own what you have. Like with a podcast, I know that we're talking about the numbers again. I know they're going to be consistent from episode to episode. You're not going to have, let's say you have 100,000, listeners. It's not going to be 100,000 one episode and 40,000 the next. It's going to be fairly consistent. So if you can own your content, whether it's your blog feed or your podcast feed or whatever, you've got your own audience.
Yep.
And that goes back to branding and having your own audience and getting people funneled into where you want them to be to follow you and to consume whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Well, stay tuned to the next season of Around the Lens. We got all kinds of exciting stuff coming at you. But I want to talk about our next topic. Get off of us for a little bit and move on to, I think Zach made a great transition, and I'm butchering it right now. But Engadget reported that Senator Franken thinks that Facebook and Google control the press too much. And basically, he says that they have unprecedented power. Their platforms have the ability to redirect into their pockets the advertising dollars that once went to newspapers. This is a quote from Al, by the way. No one company should have the power to pick and choose which content reaches consumers and which doesn't. So essentially saying that, again, Facebook and Google are the two biggest players in this whole news distribution business now because of their power. And, because of that, they can effectively, highlight, make stories pop or not pop based on who's going to pay them, like what we were talking about, Zach. So what do you guys think about this? Is this sort of does this alarm you about, sort of the journalism or visual journalism career field?
I'm going to jump right in on this one.
Please do.
Because, if we go back to traditional news and things I said earlier about having to, back up your news source, be able to defend your story, what you see on these platforms, they're claiming it is news, but there's nobody confirming that it's actual news or it's actually factual. So, there were numerous cases of somebody making up a story, putting it on a small blog, of it getting picked up by a bigger blog, getting picked up by a bigger blog, and then ABC News picks it up. And in reality, or CNN, there's no actual fact to the story. So in terms of real journalism, You know, I don't see that as real journalism.
I mean, of course, I agree it's not real journalism, except that in the market that we exist right now, it oftentimes is the only journalism. So I think that's the question. I don't think any of us are arguing in favor of that, but
No.
I'm still sort of struggling with okay, so we agree that that's the problem. What is it that we do? And then at least I'm operating in such a small pond that I'm not even to that point. The publications I mostly work for haven't raised the question that Zach explained so well. I'm curious to hear what they say in the next year or so about that. But that's I agree, Rick, but that's a huge question, like in the whole context of what's going on from the political leadership on down. And again, to get back into marketing around the lens, if somebody can come up with something in the next 45 seconds that's profound enough to fix that problem, we definitely should put that on Instagram, and that'll get you some traffic.
You know, I think Franken's good enough. He's smart enough, and doggone it, people like him. So there you go. It's true.
Right.
Facebook has a lot of control. I remember when it was about 5 or so years ago, Facebook was bleeding cash and they weren't doing well. Now they own everything and they're just ginormous. But there has to be some responsibility. Like Rick said, there's nobody editing anymore. I mean, look, there's hardly any photo editors left. You've got nobody. The adults are no longer in the room. They're just, it just goes. You remember, if it bleeds, it leads. Now it's whoever gets there first. It doesn't matter if you're right or not, because later you can go, oops.
Yeah.
And no one's going to see that tweet.
Yeah, I mean, there is that saying, you know, in today's world of online news, you know, it's better to be first than to be right, because 45 seconds later, everybody forget about it anyway. Whereas, you know, if you read real journalistic publications, you know, all of the rules of journalism, if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post online or Time Online, all the rules of journalism still exist. Whereas if you read
the reading people out there read the mainstream media versus the whatever you want to call that other thing, we know the answer is it ain't good. So
well, so much of the problem comes down to is that there's so many of these turnaround sites. I mean, I'm sure you guys see they're not in the same category as like Gateway Pundit or anything like that, like some of the crazier like 9/11 truther, Sandy Hook conspiracy theorists and things like that. But like there's places like Raw Story, and there's places like that take the real journalism news, politicize it in a kind of a nice little turnaround story, 300 words, taking a, you know, just enough to hit all the Google Analytics, you know, keywords and everything like that and numbers, and then turn it around and make it political. And that's the stuff that gets shared. I can't see the number of times I've seen some local newspaper write a story about a politician that said something, you know, weird or something like that, that would be, you know, that, and then Raw Story, and I'm just saying Raw Story, there's a ton of them out there. US Uncut is a big one as well. They take it, politicize it, pull the quote out, make that this crazy headline. And that's the thing that goes completely viral on Facebook, because it's shared from person to person to person, not through the large networks, you know, not through New York Times isn't sharing it, you know, and things like that out to their readers, which maybe they're not seeing because of the algorithm that Facebook uses to get people to actually view things. And to me, that's such an enormous problem of actually getting not only factual information, but kind of the original story out there. And also the people that are actually doing the real work, often local news people, aren't getting any of the clicks. John Oliver did a fantastic thing, I think, around the time that Spotlight came out. Was it a year ago, 2 years ago now or something? I think it was in his first or second season, where he talked about how he wouldn't be able to do all of these great investigative stories that he's doing and have fun with it if it wasn't for all the local news people. And he actually, which was super nice, he actually called out the particular people and said, go subscribe to these places, and kind of did that, which is not something that, usually you never see that on anything. I mean, it would be nice if like I always try to do, if I reference a story, reference a local news report or something like that in something that I'm writing, I always try to really hammer home that this is originates from this location. And usually if it's like a friend of mine, I say, go donate to his Patreon or donate or whatever. But it'd be nice to see if Facebook really cares, or social media sites really care about these sort of things, start having like subscription links. Well, no, I mean, I'm literally looking at this other story that ties into this. This is titled The Guardian story. I think it it came out today, 6 hours ago. Way too little, too late. Facebook's fact checkers say effort is failing. And I'm actually friends with the managing editor of Snopes.com. And it's been a huge, huge problem. Facebook made this huge thing after the Russia, debacle of buying ads and everything about we're going to hire a bunch of fact checkers. Well, supposedly the fact checkers can't actually find out what's working and what's not, find out if their numbers are if it's actually making a difference. And also on top of it, can't even find out if Facebook is following through on what they're trying to do. And on top of the fact that Facebook waited, this god awful amount of time to do this, to actually even hire a small team, not even hire, because they didn't hire. They're all, I guess, independent contractor type of situation. So they're not actually working with Facebook. They're like just, I guess, in a separate bit, working in their own offices and kind of subsidizing these places to some extent. And, Facebook needs to hire a team of actual fact checkers. Because I mean, like the only people that are actually doing anything for Facebook now are people. The Wired magazine did a really fantastic. I think it was not Lee Fang, but 2-3 years ago did a story where he went. The author of the article went out to, I think it was Indonesia or something, and found the people that actually decide what photos and what videos are graphic get to make those decisions. And all these people don't have an idea of like what American culture is, real connection to it, which is why, remember the Napalm Girl photo was tagged.
Photo, yeah.
Yeah, she was. That photo was tagged for nudity or something like that and banned from Facebook for a while, and it was on the anniversary of it. So, I mean, I don't know how we push Facebook to actually do this as a population. It's not like we're all going to boycott it. It's not going to happen. It's not Keurig. But no one got that joke, really. But
Andy,
I prefer freshly ground coffee.
Conservatives are throwing Keurigs out their windows and bashing them with golf clubs, supposedly because Keurig pulled its advertising from Sean Hannity, because Sean Hannity has been defending Roy Moore crazy aggressively, among other reasons. But I don't know why they waited this long to pull from a non-factual information person. But yeah. So I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but
sounds like a reason to go buy a Keurig.
Except don't. I really support the boycott because they're an environmental disaster. Those little plastic cups are not recyclable.
Yeah, Keurig kind of sucks. I mean, honestly, if you talk about environment, I mean, they're neat and convenient, but
AeroPress.
Yeah.
So Zach, you just like created a whole new spot in my brain for that. So there are people who take these stories, who get paid as journalists to take this story and make it into that story.
That's probably if you go through most people's Facebook feeds. I mean, like obviously, I have a much more political Facebook feed probably than anybody else here. It was probably an understatement, and I would say that probably 80% I would say that 80% of the people 80% of the stories that I see shared are not the original source of the information. They're a reblogged site. Basically, they take a portion of it, add a little bit of their own kind of twist on the story, maybe their own information. They have something added to the fact that there's an Russian investigation. Oh, well, personally, I know this, and add it to it. But the problem is that maybe you click through and maybe they have a link, a hot link. They usually don't. I find that they usually don't actually source the information saying a New York Times story or a, Alabama.com story is saying this. And so to me, that's always been a huge problem. I've actually been offered a couple jobs working at these sites, and I've actually turned them down because I just couldn't do it. I literally just could not.
That's where I was
do that
going
on a
is
daily
in
basis.
terms of, not that I'm particularly looking for a job, but it's turning out that you're seeing some of the few jobs out there. Because what we're really talking about here, what Rick was talking about, was gatekeepers. We used, it's a fancy word for those people who used to come down on our heads and say, where did you get that photo? And to do all that credibility stuff, which is, they now call them gatekeepers. And so what you're telling me now, the gatekeepers have flipped over into this other realm, because all those picture editors we used to know, not literally, but in terms of the jobs, are there. That's something I did not know. No idea how to address it.
That's because the picture editors are all unemployed.
Yeah. I understand.
I mean, most of the people that write for those sites and work for that entire kind of portion of the internet aren't usually journalists, like first-hand journalists in any way, shape, and form. They're writers, and unfortunately, a lot of those sites are paid by click. So not paid by dollar amount. There's no set amount. There's no salary or whatever. They're literally paid by ad dollars and Google clicks. So whatever is able to get the most amount of attention is going to do well. And that's another reason why, those sites are eating New York Times, eating Washington Post, and, a lot of local news, just taking all their traffic away from them and potentially all of their ad dollars as well. And, that's, I find that I've had conversations with the editors of these sites, and I go, isn't this just kind of a circling down the drain of how long before you have no content to take from before there's no more actual journalists producing this news? And it's all just, I guess we're just going to do hearsay about, I heard, on Twitter, somebody wrote this.
There's always going to be a couple.
Yeah.
They don't really care if there's 5 sources out there. It's, they'll get it from the New York Times or WAPO or whatever. They don't really care. Everyone else can go away as long as there's 1 or 2 sources. They're good. So there's no incentive at all.
I'd like to think that there will always be people who want real news that's fact checked and backed up, and the editors can defend it, the writers can defend it, the shooters can defend it.
This is why I've said it's not popular necessarily, but dollars, I think, should go, tax dollars and stuff, to funding media. But there has to be a way to make it so it's not, state run and such, but state funded.
I'm sure Trump will get right on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what I'm saying? There needs to be a way to fund actual journalism that you can trust, but have it not be able to be tainted by the money coming
NPR.
from. Yeah.
Well, NPR is more.
How come there is no accountability at all, though? It seems people can, the fake media or the fake stories that are generated.
Yep.
There's no comeback. It's that quick news cycle. The lies get spread. It gets spread thinner, and the original source, whatever it happens to be, there's no accountability of who actually created the false. So where is that accountability, and how do you get it back? Or how do you educate the people to look for that verified story? Is that even possible?
Well, if they're of a certain age, there's really nothing you can do. But if they're of the younger generation, you can present them with the information at a young age and teach them to be critical and examine thing and be skeptical and to look at multiple sources. But I would say there's certain sectors of the community, certain sectors of the population, and certain probably age groups that may or may not care. They may want to just look at news that meets and kind of feeds their particular viewpoint, and they're happy with that.
Yeah. Well, there's a handful. I've actually met a couple teachers that are actually started. They're either English or history teachers usually, that have actually started a fake news class. And actually it's to teach their kids in high school usually to critically think. God forbid those 2 words, critical thinking. In
Let me just mute your mic really quick here, Zach. Hold on a second.
What's that? Sorry.
I'm just gonna mute your mic for. I'm gonna mute your mic.
But they're teaching their kids how to critically think, and they're actually finding that they're not only interested in doing it, but also they're enjoying it because it's a it's something different. They get to go look through real news sources, find fake versions of it, and kind of, do it. I think that, the few teachers that I've talked to that are actually doing it are just really fantastic teachers. So like, at least in my conversations with them. But I mean, I volunteer to talk. I mean, that's one thing I think that we could potentially do as photojournalists. We could volunteer to talk at schools to kind of try to be like, I'd love to talk to, a high school, college class or whatever, and go, okay, so here's how you identify either fake news in general, or a fake photo, or, just the key signs of things that you look for wording and phrasing. And if even just that basic stuff can be taught to a new generation, I think can do. The other thing that I do, which if anybody follows me, you might notice that I do this probably maybe aggressively, is that if you see fake news, call it fake news. If
you see fake news, promote it more.
If you see fake news, say something.
If you see something, say something.
Exactly. So like, if you see your friend sharing it, just go, hey, I know this looks real, but just so you know, yournewswire.com is not an actual trusted source of information. And here's the actual story from like somewhere else. We have to spend a little bit of time, unfortunately, on top of it, on top of our daily lives, possibly fighting against this tide, whether it be just, stupid people sharing stupid stuff, or the Russians coming in and influencing our elections, or whatever we want to call it. So.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think, again, that's another one of those. There's 45 seconds, if I could see a good picture, that I think you could put out there and somebody would say, I want to go to that site because I'm interested in fake news. What does it look like? What are the pictures that Zach has done, or that any of us have done at situations that then got propagandized later? I mean, that would be.
David?
And also, to go back to something Rick said a while ago, to not have our face on here. Because I'm not 100% convinced that the average person gives a crap what we look like, but I think they're very interested in visual journalism.
Yeah, I brushed my hair
all this time.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Well, I think
I completely agree. I think that we need to be showing photographs. We're in this photography show. We're photojournalists.
Yeah.
Hopefully throughout our archives there are a handful of images that we're really proud of, and I think that will promote the show, maybe going into the show in the future. Maybe, the day before, we could all put out, Craig and David and Sharky and, Ron, we're all going to be on the show, and here's some of the work of these photographers. And if you have 6 shooters who each have X number of followers, put that out, then we're cross-marketing, which is not a bad thing, promoting the show, and letting people, introducing my followers to what you do, Zach. And, I don't think there's
the best example that if I could jump in, would have been, it's a little late now, but to have done something in this show around Pete Souza's photographs and Rick's photographs. Because Rick, I've been seeing you
just Pete.
No, you got a couple in there. I saw that. And I thought that was very, very smart marketing to piggyback on his stuff in a good way. Plus, they're great photographs of yours.
Actually, I didn't realize we put them out there because of a show that I'm having at Exposure. I didn't really put them out there to piggyback on Pete's book because I wouldn't do that.
Just pictures benefit because his photographs of Obama are in the public conversation now, and yours are in the public conversation.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Well, in that case, my timing was good. Not planned, but good.
But imagine I'm scrolling through an Instagram feed, and I can see, oh wow, I can sit in tomorrow night and I can actually meet this guy, and I can hear him talk about some of the things like we've been discussing, some of the challenges, and also to actually look at pictures, because I do think that's why people would come to this, because not to see our faces. So you started on your topics list, David, about what would you go in the future. For me, that would be one thing. Would be maybe. When I started to go through the calendar, maybe I'll go through the calendar more and try to drop in something related to images I have, or Rick, and anybody can drop in something related to images they actually have related to topics on that year-long calendar.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned views and you mentioned putting more pictures on YouTube. We average about 10 to 20 views per video. You know, again, that's sometimes high, sometimes low. Can anyone guess what the most viewed video, at least show-wise, is on our channel on YouTube? I'll give you a hint. He's a guest on tonight's show.
I don't know. All right.
Thank you
Who
very
could
much.
that be?
Sharky.
Episode 27, Mike Sharky James has
That's right.
It goes back to, I said, build your brand, build the numbers, put out a quality. I wouldn't have thousands upon thousands of people listening if I didn't put out quality work. So you have to do quality work, build the brand, get
That's
people
something
where you are.
though that is really, like, in my experiences with like working photojournalists, building a brand is something that is almost aggressively looked down upon, which is something that I'm always
Making a
surprised.
living.
What's that?
That and making a living.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the problems. It's almost seen as, you know, disrespectful to kind of advertise your work to the news. And I don't know if that's a photojournalism thing that's being beaten into people, or just a fear. Because I mean, one thing we've had a problem with before when we try to get people to give us photos, in the early days, we tried to get people to give us photos of their work so we could showcase it on beforehand on the show. And it's always was well, I don't know if my paper will let me do that. And, you know, obviously I think 2 years on the show is now a freelancer, so it won't be nearly as much of an issue. I think 2 years ago, I feel like we used to at least have some staff photographers on. But that it's something that's always surprised me, because the first journalist I worked for is one of the most, within progressive journalism, most of the shameless promoters alive, and everybody in my part of the kind of industry knows him. So that's what I learned, is I'm a shameless promoter for everything I do. And so, by the way, Visu News just started a new news site, and there's a new version of my documentary coming out. But anyway,
all right. So
photojournalists aren't really taught, I don't think, and don't see that. I don't see them doing as much,
Zach,
which is something we're trying to teach them too. So.
Zach, if we just bring the discussion around to talking about today's world of media and multimedia, you know, a number of years back, I mean, I would shoot for the New York Times, and I wasn't really going to promote myself as shooting for the Times. But now in today's world, you know, the world of media is broken up so much that everybody's promoting themselves, including the New York Times, on social media. And I don't think there's anything wrong for photojournalists to get out there and promote their brand. I mean, we all know that, you know, living full time as a freelance photojournalist is not easy.
No.
You have to be signal through the noise.
Yep.
You have to, because there's a lot of noise out there, and people have short attention spans. You have to hit them hard with a quality product, let them know who you are, get them to be a fan of your work, and then you can show them your work, which is a good thing. Yeah. And then maybe someone will pay you for it at some point. Maybe.
You know,
ask Zach how well that goes.
I've gotten editorial jobs, in addition to commercial jobs, from people who have seen my work on social media and say, "Well, I want to hire that guy." Mm-hmm. You know, I have one recurring client quite on a regular basis, and that's how they initially found me.
You want their name. You want your name on their lips. You want to be the person that they think of, and that happens when you get yourself out there more. Yep. If a bear poops in the woods,
don't step in it.
Happen, right? Yeah.
I thought everybody might be interested to know that our most downloaded episode of the podcast, the audio version of the show, is, anyone want to take a guess?
Sharky.
Jeff.
Episode 51, actually, is the most downloaded episode. Does not feature Sharky James. But
it was the one right after me.
Episode 50, the episode before our 1 year anniversary show, is the second most downloaded, which does feature Mike Sharky James. So, Sharky, you are the reason this show exists. But, anyways, you know, of course, no show would be complete without me mentioning a certain type of camera that I use. This is kind of the running gag, Sharky. You haven't appeared on the show in a while, but since then, I like to mention the GH5 or any Panasonic Micro Four Thirds. Hey, look at that! Yes, of course, another Micro Four Thirds user, Fujifilm. Gotta love the M4
The XT2, love it.
Indeed. So, anyways, I love the Panasonic GH5. It's my go-to favorite camera. And of course, our final topic. We're just gonna touch on this quickly because I know some people don't give a junk about Micro Four Thirds cameras, but I do want to mention that Panasonic did announce the G9, which is their sort of more photography-focused Micro Four Thirds camera. Sharky, you talked a lot about this. You read off the specs on your show. We'll start with you. What do you think of this camera? Do you think this is a right step in the direction for Panasonic with their Lumix line?
Absolutely. The GH5 has long since been the go-to for a lot of video shooters.
Right.
And so it builds on that. But here's what's really cool is you can get 80 megapixel files out of this thing because it does the pixel shift technology. So it'll take a photo and it'll take a bunch more at the same time shifted by a pixel, and it gets 80 megapixels. So you're not going to be using this for sports, like I said in my show, fast action, that sort of thing. This is going to be for the landscape shooters and the more considered photography. And people who poo-poo these small sensors really just need to get with the times here because things have come a long way. It's like those who are saying, I would never shoot mirrorless. Watch when Canon and Nikon come out with their serious mirrorless systems. All the mirrorless haters are going to be all about their latest Canon and Nikon mirrorless things. It's the same people that didn't want a flippy, tilting screen in a camera, right? And any of us who've shot over crowds know that is a helpful feature right there.
It takes the guesswork out of the Hail Mary shot.
Exactly. And you get used to, over the years, you're shooting with a wide angle usually, right? And so you get used to the angle, and so you can probably nail it. But this removes all doubt right there. And so these smaller sensors, these Micro Four Thirds cameras, are pretty darn amazing these days. And the people that wouldn't ever consider those, the ones that are like, you only need to shoot full frame. I would never shoot crop sensor. Well, there's medium format too. If you're all about sensors, there's really nice big sensors for you as well.
Yeah, Zach.
You don't tell me if somebody wants to give me a Hassie with a digital back, I will go out there and shoot the heck out of any protests.
Listen, I shot the Hasselblad X1D 50C. It was one of our sponsors, Bar Lenses, sent it to me, and it was great. But most people can't even tell the difference between something shot on a Micro Four Thirds or even like large format. They'll tell you they can and they cannot. They just can't.
Particularly once you upload it to Facebook.
Exactly.
Because you definitely need 80 meg. You definitely need something that's going to make an 80 meg file for Facebook.
Yeah.
I give the film shooters crap on my show all the time. The cranky film guys, the CFGs as they're called. And it's funny how you go get cameras we all grew up with, and you shoot film, and then you go have it scanned only to end up with a digital file.
Right.
Why? Just why?
Yeah.
Anyhow, all right, the GH9, great camera.
G9,
whatever it's called, the G9. That's right.
Yeah, no, it looks interesting. I don't see myself getting it, but I think if you're not ready to make the full plunge towards the GH5, which is a little bit more expensive, I think the G9 is a perfectly, right up there level of camera. And I know they're going to come out with other different levels that are a little bit less expensive to shoot, like the 4K 60 and all that stuff. So. A lot of great stuff going on there, and nice to see some devotion to the Micro Four Thirds. Any other comments on Micro Four Thirds or Panasonic's G9 camera from anybody else?
Well, I've been a Micro Four Thirds shooter for a long, long time. Part of the time I'm working with Olympus, mostly not working with them, but I just sort of going to endorse everything that Sharky was saying, which is I can't imagine how many people you run into who are still obsessed about sensor size when I show them things that I've done all over the world and all sorts of qualities of light. And now I'm doing all these videos. These are all done on a 4/3 sensor. So
yeah,
I've long since gone over to that side. And I do think it's actually where the future. I read a great statistic once that Olympus had 40% of market share in the new middle class in Asia. And that's because that's the segment of the population that didn't have legacy lenses. They didn't have grandma and grandpa's Nikons or Canons. They were just looking around and saying, wow, look at that thing. It's small, it's cheap. I got that, they have the funny pink colors on half of them. and so that's why they've done so well there. So I'm all in mirrorless 100%. I literally haven't used a DSLR in about 15 years, and I'm still employed. So,
all right, Zach, come on over to our side.
Have we gotten a oh God, what's the name of that site? Rating on this camera yet?
DxO.
I'm just always
DxO, Mark.
the
DxO site?
Yeah, DxO.
I don't think it's been tested yet.
Yeah, I don't think it's out yet.
It's just barely been announced.
All right. Well, I think that's going to close up this week's show, our big episode 102 year anniversary. Of course, before we sign off, I want to throw all our panelists an opportunity to shout out whatever they'd like to shout out. Let's start with Craig. Is there anything, Craig, you'd like us to look at?
Oh, Facebook, no.
I thought you were going to go with another F word there. I'm glad you did.
No. I probably usually...
Facebook is, I've got a face.
Instagram is craig.stampley or at craig.stampley. And then my website is stampley.photography.
Awesome. Dave? I know what yours is, but you tell everybody.
Well, I actually just redid my site, and here's a perfect example of being technologically behind the times. It wasn't phone friendly, so my new site is phone friendly.
Major faux pas.
And yeah, exactly, big faux pas, and it actually looks really nice. So, encourage you all to take a look at it. Look at all the groovy new videos that I've got on there in the last couple of years, because most of my work has moved over to motion. And one last thing, by the way, happy birthday, David! This is something you should be, excited about. 100 shows is a lot of shows to have done. So.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the longest running podcast I've ever done. Thank you. Yeah, the highest I've ever gotten before was about 50 for my first show. But yeah, so thank you. Yeah, it's been. I didn't think I'd get this far, but I'm glad it's made it so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing how far we can get up to. So I know for sure I've got Sharky set for episode 150.
Absolutely, every 50.
As long as I have Sharky set for the show, that's my guidepost. That helps drive me to get to that show, because I know I'll see a doubling in audience every time, every 50 episodes, every year. Sharky, where can people find out more about you? Obviously, you've already highlighted your stuff, but go ahead and do it again.
You got to get the plugs in. Petapixel Photography Podcast at petapixel.com/podcast. That's petapixel.com/podcast. Or the new show I do with Brian Matias, No Name Photo Show, nonamephotoshow.com.
How'd you come up with that name?
We couldn't think of a name, so we're like, let's make sure it doesn't have one then, and call it the No Name Photo Show. Somebody said that our show is like if Jerry and George, from Seinfeld, had a show, and actually, really, someone, I think it was actually Brian's wife, Nicolesy, said it's actually like if George and George have a show. So there you go.
I say Kramer versus Kramer, but
Do you listen to the show?
I do. I love your show. Love all your shows. Any other shows coming up down the line? Any third show? Any video shows? No.
Oh man, I tell you.
Come on, Sharky. You don't need free time. You don't need free time. Do another show.
Free time. What's that?
I don't know.
You can re-roll. Go back and look at this, and you'll see me yawning about a half dozen times.
Yeah. You should have your daughter on the show in the future. That would be great.
Should. She's a teen. Turning 14 soon, and just every 100 episodes of my show I have her redo the outro, and you can, and I think it was probably your idea, and I played it. Actually played you in episode 101 at the end, and I played her voice, her outro over the course of the last few years, and it's amazing how you can tell she's a teen now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe when my children get older, I'll try and get them on the show. I mean, they're going to take over the show eventually. Again, multi-generational here. Rick, where can people find out more about you and your stuff?
rickfriedman.com, or you can find us on Facebook or on Instagram as Rick Friedman Pics. And like I said, we've got a whole bunch of workshops coming up. Exposure in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates next week. Nice. And the Bahama workshop in early January with Vanelli. Let me see. December 9th through 11th, I'll be at the New Jersey Camera Show. In the spring, we've got the Can-Am Photo Festival, which is a Doug Hansgate event up in Niagara Falls on the Canadian side this year. And then the event with Douglas Dubler. So, and I'm sure we'll throw a couple more in there.
Nice.
But that's what we've got on the schedule for the moment. And David, congratulations on the show, and thank you for letting me be part of it. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being on, Rick. Thank you all for being on. Again, you've all been on the show pretty early on for the most part, and I appreciate you all being with your willingness to be on the show when it was pretty much nothing, and it was just an idea in my head, and no one listened to it. And now we've got a few people listening to it, and you're still coming on for some reason. So I appreciate that. You'll always be invited on. And,
it's pity.
What's that?
we come here out of pity.
Pity. There you go.
Didn't you know, David, this is actually the roast of Around the Lens?
I know.
Put the microphone down.
I think we're all going to market it more from here on out.
That's right. We're going to have nothing but photos featured on, no visuals. But
see, then they won't be able to tell what we look like.
Yeah.
We'll take photos of each other.
Photos will be great for an audio podcast.
It'll be perfect. Right. You can use your imagination.
Well, you can put them in the stream. You can put them in the audio podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
Martin Bailey's been doing that for like 13 years now.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, that guy's been doing it for a long time. But again, this has all been an experiment and an idea I had in my head, and it's been going on. I think I'm just happy to do it. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy talking to you all and having you guys talk about this. Again, this topic, which I felt before I created the show was woefully underrepresented, in the format it is before I put out the show. And I think we're still pretty much the only show that really delves into the topic as in-depthly as we do. So, I'll continue to do it, if nothing else, for that very reason, because I believe this type of discussion should be out there in the space, in the world, being talked about. And at the very minimum, I enjoy talking about it. So if I'm the only person who does it, then so be it. But hopefully we can get the audience numbers up. Hopefully we can increase the amount of people who watch the show and can spread the word, spread the good news about visual journalism. And, eventually we'll be able to talk about how things are getting better. And, Zach's bank account has gone up, and we're talking about all those 6-figure jobs that we're having to turn down. Right, Zach?
Oh, yeah.
Before I final sign off, again, I want to, Ron or Zach, guys got anything you want to throw out there before we get off the show?
Here's to another 100 episodes in the future.
Awesome. I just remembered, by the way, that we first started talking about doing this show, or at least you talked to me about doing the show at CS's walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, I think it was, half freezing to death because CS Muncie decided, let's bring this wedding party or a bachelor party. Let's walk across the Brooklyn Bridge because that'll be fun in, what was it, September?
October, I believe.
October in New York? Yeah. So, yeah.
Good times. All right. For Ron Hamilton and Zach Roberts, I am David J. Murphy. This has been episode 100 of Around the Lens. Hold on. Again, I've been your host, David J. Murphy, for all 100 episodes. For the most part, I've kept a couple times when I dropped out. But again, when Zach hosted it. But let me start that again.
We don't talk about those.
No, we don't. We're episode 100 of Around the Lens. I'm your host, David J. Murphy, and we are out.